I'm also going to be speaking this morning to a man who wants to be a hero for the male gender. He has set up a political party called Justice for Men and Boys, brackets, and women who love them. And here's why.
For more than 30 years, the interests of men and boys have been assaulted, primarily by the actions and inactions of the state, and politicians basically pandering to the fear of the female vote. If they don't forever worry about women's issues and finance women's programs and so on.
Well, that's Mike Buchanan. Is he right? Has the pendulum swung too far in favour of women's rights to the detriment of men's? Do we need a party fighting for justice for men and boys? I've got a clenched fist as I am reading that line there. Would you vote for it? 0500 92 95 00 is the number. Mike Buchanan is hoping to contest a number of seats at the next general election and is looking for candidates in Scotland. If you're interested, you can give him and me a call. In a while, I'll be speaking to the founder of a new political party hoping to contest seats in Scotland at the next general election. He is called Mike Buchanan, and the party is called Justice for Men and Boys, brackets, and women who love them. We've cast about for some initial responses. They're mixed.
I would vote for this party. I think it's really crucial that men are supported and that boys are supported. My sons are 10 and 9. This political party would make me feel better to know that my sons would have the support, and just that the issues that are coming up for boys and for men are being represented and are being brought to the forefront of people's minds.
The reason men don't need their own political party is because essentially the world as it is at the moment is run, administered, organised by men for men. If you look at the positions of power in politics and in economics and culture, by and large men have far more power than women. And obviously feminism is attempting to redress that balance. And what's happening now is with this men's empowerment movement, it's essentially an assault upon feminism.
Well, that's Alan Bissett there, Glasgow-based author, and Katie, the concerned mother of 2 boys. 1 vote for, 1 vote against. Let me know what you think. I'll be speaking to Mike Buchanan, the founder of Justice for Men and Boys, in about 20 minutes' time. Coming up, we're going to be talking about, do men and boys need their own political party to represent their views? Well, they've got one. It's called Justice for Men and Boys. It was founded by former Conservative Party member Mike Buchanan. Good morning, Mike.
Yes, good morning, Kaye.
Good morning. Why do men need such a political party?
Well, men collectively pay 72% of the income tax in the UK and women only 28%. So in cash terms, men pay about £64 billion more income tax than women every year. Yet for well over 30 years, men have been ever more assaulted by the actions and inactions of successive governments. And whenever legislation or official guidance favours one gender over another, it always favours women over men. I'm not aware of a single piece of legislation or official guidance which favours men over women. And the coalition is just as bad as the preceding Labour administration.
So in what way do you, or give us some examples of areas in which you think that women are getting a better deal?
Okay, well, the state ensures that men pay their ex-partners to financially support their children, but fails in return to ensure that those men are given reasonable access to their children. This is an emotional assault both on the men and on their children. And if we turn to domestic abuse, at least 40% of victims of domestic abuse and violence are men.
Sorry, Mike, where are you getting your statistics for that one on?
On which area? On the domestic violence?
Yes, domestic violence.
The Office for National Statistics.
Right. Okay. So
it's probably a great deal more than 40% because it's known that men are far less likely to report domestic abuse than women.
Mm-hmm. I would just like to say, and I'm not questioning your statistics, or you're saying that they come from that source, but I mean, having had a lot of experience of speaking to people who work directly in the field, I think a lot of people would dispute that one with you. But there you go. That is absolutely a view. What else?
But can I just say the people working in the field are invariably women who look after women's shelters. That's exactly the point I'm making. Now, the taxpayer finances over 4,000 places in refuges exclusively for women, and there are just 15 places for men.
Okay, which you feel is unfair, obviously.
Well, 4,000 to 15, yes, I do think that's unfair, Kaye.
Okay. Are you confident that you have got support out there for a party for men and boys?
Yes, we have considerable support. We have support also. I was interested to listen to the comments from the mother of boys earlier on, because we have a lot of supporters who are mothers of boys who see who see their boys disadvantaged in a very feminized education system, which delivers, into university, 60% of undergraduates are women these days.
I mean, does equality have to be a fight, Mike? You seem to be framing it very much in those terms. What women take, men lose. Would you really want there to be less female undergraduates?
I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is that wherever we look, the state engineers, the state, which is overwhelmingly financed by men, engineers better outcomes for women than men. So, another example,
Mike,
Kaye,
why do you think that the state is more financed by men? How has that come about?
Why? Well, men pay, as I said, men pay 72% of the income tax take, and women only 28%.
But it could, of course, it could be argued, Mike, that the men have the opportunity to pay more income tax because they have more opportunity to take the more well-paid jobs. They have more opportunity to be in the workplace, where women have limitations in doing that and have historically done so.
At the end of the day, a woman in the modern era can expect a working life of, let's say, 45 years. The idea that she's, how many years of that is devoted to bringing up young children? Not an awful lot.
Well, we do know. Well, let's not get into an argument here. It's going to be a very interesting discussion here, and I'm sure lots of people will have views on it, Mike. And you're going to come back and speak about it in just about 10 minutes' time. But just let me ask you: you do have political ambitions to advance this political party. You do want to contest seats, don't you? And yes. Seats potentially in Scotland.
Yes, you of course have only the one Conservative MP, David Mundell in Dumfriesshire, Clydesdale, and Tweeddale. Now, he had a majority of a little over 4,000 in 2010, so I think that's a seat that we'd very much like to fight.
Okay, well, I hope David Mundell's listening. That would maybe perk him up this morning. Mike, thank you very much. We will speak to you very soon. Does Mike have your vote? 0500 92 95 00 is the number to call. An anonymous text here: of course I'd vote for the Men's Party. More power to them. But please don't read out my name in case my missus is listening in. And Sandy says, Mike Buchanan doesn't represent modern men. I have 2 young sons and I don't want them anywhere near his manifesto. Well, give me a call and tell me why. 0500 92 95 00. Do we need a political party to specifically represent the interests of men and boys? Whatever you think, we have got one set up by former Conservative Party member Mike Buchanan, who I spoke to earlier on, and he's joining us again. Lots of interesting things, he says. Sort of headline that men give over 72% of the tax take and yet are very poorly served, he feels, in a number of fields. And he gave me a number of examples there. For instance, in terms of looking out in the event of a couple splitting up, they obviously have to pay alimony for the child, but are not equally served back in terms of custody. He was talking about an increasingly feminised education system and a disproportionately greater number of female undergraduates, also speaking on the level of domestic abuse. According to his understanding and statistics, 40% of domestic abuse victims are men, and yet the facilities that are there, again, very much disproportionately in favour of women. And he's very concerned about this. So I want to know if you agree. 0500 92 95 00 is the number to call. You can text 80295 or you can email callkaye@bbc.co.uk. Has the pendulum swung too far in favour of women's rights to the detriment of men's rights? Let's speak to Alan Bissett, who's a Glasgow-based author, ex-secondary school English teacher. Good morning, Alan.
Hi there, Kaye.
Will you be signing up?
I certainly will not.
Why not?
Well, it sounds wonderful, doesn't it? Justice for men and boys and the women who love them. But you don't have to scratch too far into Mike's party to find out that what is beneath this is the old familiar hum of women hating. He has a document on his website called Consultation for Party Members and Donors. And the way in which women are characterised in this, it's people who make false accusations of rape against men. It's people who make false paternity claims in order to claim benefits. He actually is advocating a policy in which all state support is removed from single mothers who are not independently wealthy. So I would like him to tell me what would happen to those women in that eventuality, women with children, some of whom are boys.
Well, I think I should let Mike speak for himself. Mike's with us.
Yes, hello, Kaye. If the gentleman reads that closely what we say about single mothers, we aren't talking about withdrawing support for single mothers. We're saying that at some point in the future, the state should say that it is not going to financially support women who become pregnant without any prospects of financially supporting the child.
Yes, that's exactly what I said.
No, it's not. It's not. I mean, you talk about withdrawing support for single mothers. So women who are single mothers at the moment, we obviously wouldn't do anything about.
Mike, how do these women become pregnant? Any ideas?
Oh, come on, Kaye. That's just a silly point.
Well, it's not really, is it?
No, at the end of the day, women know these days that if they want a child but they can't afford it, then the taxpayer will pay. And I think it's an assault on the taxpayer that they have to pay for children that aren't their own.
So only wealthy people should have children then?
No, I'm not saying that. But I mean, are you saying that any woman who cannot support a child should get pregnant and expect the taxpayer to pay for it?
Yes.
That's outrageous.
Oh, really? Right. Okay. So what's going to happen to those women who get pregnant and state support is withdrawn? Where do you think they're going to go?
It's
the street.
Well, I mean, no, absolutely not. No, they can give the child up for adoption.
Great. Right. This is the sort of future we can look at then.
Let's take this back to justice for men and boys. I mean, clearly, yeah. Alan, you feel that Mike is coming from a kind of female hating, which sounds a very strong expression, position. Mike denies that. But so let's just move it back to this justice for men and boys, Mike. So what sort of justice would you like to see? Give us, I mean, what would be your key manifesto pledges? Because, I mean, you're saying that you will contest parliamentary seats under the banner of justice for men and boys. So what will your key manifesto pledges be?
I think the key manifesto pledge is that we have gender equality rather than relentless special treatment for women, regardless of the impact on society.
Right.
So for example, an example in the public sector, a third of public sector employees, only a third of public sector employees are men. Yet the Equality Act permits public sector bodies to favour women over men in terms of recruitment and promotion. This obviously drives up male unemployment. And for every 3 unemployed women, there are 4 unemployed men. And we know that unemployment is a major driver of suicide among men. And men are 3.5 times more likely than women to commit suicide in the UK.
Right, okay. I want calls on this, 0500 92 95 00. Mike Buchanan, who is the founder of Justice for Men and Boys, he wants to see gender equality. He feels there is gender inequality at the moment, and it is men who are getting the poorer end of the deal, that we have now reached a situation where women are favoured over men. I'd love to hear what you think about that. 0500 92 95 00 or text 80295. Right, here we go. A perfect example of positive discrimination. Morning, Fred. How are you doing?
I'll tell you one area where women are still punching above their weight.
Go on then.
Childbirth.
Yeah, I know.
I reckon it's pretty much nearly 100%.
Really?
At the last count, yes.
That's shocking. We are talking about a new political party. It's called Justice for Men and Boys, founded by Mike Buchanan, who feels that the pendulum has swung too far in favour of women. He wants gender equality, and that for him means redressing the balance in favour of men, because, I say, we have gone too far the other way. Do you share his concerns? Will you be signing up? 0500 92 95 00 is a number to call. Alan Bissett, Glasgow-based author and ex-secondary school English teacher, will not be signing up. He feels this comes from a position of basically just wanting to put down women. But of course, Mike Buchanan refutes that. Liz Clark, good morning, Liz.
Good morning, Kaye.
Good morning. You're the mum of 2 boys.
Yep.
Yep. Do you feel the pendulum has swung too far in favour of women's rights?
Well, Kaye, when I first heard about Mike's party, I actually made the mistake of thinking it was some sort of light-hearted thing, that he feels that a lot of things that I actually agree with, as in a lot of advertising and media things I feel nowadays do degenerate men, and it's almost as if it's gone the other way, the pendulum swung right round there. But having listened to Mike, I realise that it's not that at all. It's all very, very important issues. And I agree with Alan, actually, in some of the points that he made there. But it sounds, Kaye, like, we fought, I don't know, maybe Mike's seen into the future, and so the suffragettes had to fight from the early in the century to get female equality. Maybe he sees it going the other way. You'll see things on television, a programme that you were associated with at one point, advertising around about that programme, a women's programme supposedly for women. And they come away with things that are completely against men, classing men all in the one thing,
They're all the same.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a strap line before it saying, men are attracted to smart women, opposites must attract. That's not right. We wouldn't be able to say that if it was the other way about.
Yeah, and as the mother of two boys, I suppose, I mean, I know your boys are, older now, but, if they were younger, I could see why you would be concerned in the same way as the mum of two girls. I'm sometimes concerned at some of the messages that get put out there. It's just 2 minutes to 10 right there. I mean, Alan Bissett, taking up that point, maybe moving away from some of Mike's agenda, but to take on Liz's concerns that perhaps the pendulum might have swung in such a direction that women are often guilty of making some of the comments and creating some of the atmospheres that, in fact, they were so aggrieved about if we go back 20 years.
Well, I mean, obviously, people are capable of making comments about other people that are unfair, and women are no exception to that. But we have to place this within a historical context, which is one of the oppression of women. That's what history looks like, essentially. Men have been in power and have arranged society in such a way that they stay in power. And this party is simply a perpetuation of that.
Mike, what is your personal feeling towards women?
I think the idea. Well, I mean,
because you seem to be quite personal in your comments.
No, not at all. I mean, all this is, Kaye, is a shaming tactic. You said at the beginning of the programme, I have a clenched fist as I read these words, justice for men and boys. Now, how would you feel about the male presenter of a major radio show who said, I have a clenched fist as I read these words, justice for women and girls?
I don't think I'd have a problem. I mean, it was okay. It
Really?
may have been a crass comment, but it's a very striking name for a party. I mean, if it had been justice for anything, I think I would have said the same thing.
But I mean, why? I mean, are you inferring that I just don't like women? I mean, it's just silly.
No, I wasn't. Alan Bissett was. A fellow man was. But we'll pick it up after the news. We're speaking to Mike Buchanan, who's the founder of a new political party hoping to contest seats at the next general election, including seats in Scotland. The party is called Justice for Men and Boys, brackets, and women who love them. He feels that the pendulum has swung too far in favour of women's issues. He says men provide 72% of the tax take and yet are poorly served on many levels in education, employment, access to children. Let me know if you feel the same or not. 0500 92 95 00. You can text 80295 or email callkaye@bbc.co.uk. Moira's called in. Good morning, Moira.
Good morning.
Good Moira. Good Moira morning. Is Mike on to something?
Well, if your former speaker who indicated that there are more sinister motives to use, a very emotive word, I get behind Mike's party, then I'm concerned about that. However, in my text, I texted earlier and I said that I'm the mother of 3 boys, very high-achieving boys, thankfully. I'm very lucky. I'm also the head teacher a retired head teacher of secondary school. And there is evidence, I think, that boys are doing badly against girls. Mm-hmm. I think the current education system, certainly in Scotland, tends to be continuous assessment, and it tends to have a big focus on communication skills. And that does advantage girls in terms of education.
Right.
And while I do feel that I would not want the drive for women to do well to cease in any way at all, whether socially, educationally, emotionally, any of those things. I do feel there needs to be a refocus on what boys are doing and drive them forward.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mike seemed to be thinking before the news that I had some personal agenda, and I'm thinking that he is women hating or didn't like women or whatever. I suppose what it comes from is maybe a bit of a disappointment that if we're pursuing an equality agenda, which I would very much support, I would like to think both cases could be advanced, and it shouldn't always be a fight and one to the detriment of the other. But Moira, if you are seeing, and I mean, clearly as somebody who's worked in education for a long time, and that is your understanding of things, where does it come from, do you think?
It's hard to say. I think it's just the exam system has changed. It used to be end of year tests. And that boys like things like boys are competitive. Now these are generalities, obviously, because some boys will have got very good communication skills. They're continuously working. Most teenage boys, in my experience, they go through that kind of dip when the hormones hit in. It affects the boys far worse than the girls because they focus on the girls to the detriment of their education. Some boys, not all. I'm speaking generalities. I think. Over a period of years, the government has tried to improve education, develop education, and some things have been good and some things have been bad. And as I say, currently, I just think, the system focuses too highly on the skills which women have more naturally. Mm-hmm. It's very difficult to find the right way forward, but I do feel we need to focus in schools on improving the sort of self-esteem of boys.
I suppose, it's kind of understandable, isn't it, that as Alan was saying, historically, women have been the underdog, if you like, in many kind of public spheres, and there would be. And I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to change the drive for equality for women. Obviously, I've benefited from that. Yeah, but not if it is then going to reflect poorly or affect poorly the chances of boys. I'm good. I'm glad we can have a more temperate discussion about this. Daniel's in Edinburgh. Good morning, Daniel.
Good morning, Kaye. Good morning.
Good morning. What do you think, Daniel?
Well, it's interesting that the issues of inequalities in respect of gender are being raised. I don't think anyone's going to disagree with exploring the issue of inequality between both men and women. What I do think is happening at the moment is that the approach taken by this particular political party is extremely damaging and sets the cause back a good number of years in terms of addressing some inequalities that affect men specifically.
What are you seeing then, Daniel, that causes you disquiet?
Well, for instance, at the moment, there are a number of government initiatives around to try and encourage greater take-up of health services by harder-to-reach groups. And one of those harder-to-reach groups is older men in particular. And the more we hear about comments made by the leader of the political party to talk about taking services away from women and not supporting single mothers, it's going to detract from the very important work that is taking place to try and address some of those health inequalities that I've highlighted.
Why do you think that, Daniel?
Well, public perception is everything, effectively. And if you look at a topic such as support for victims of domestic abuse, for instance, I know that has been raised in your programme. At the moment in Scotland, there has never been a national campaign addressed to look at the issues and support men who have experienced domestic abuse or domestic violence. And that's certainly something that we'd like to see improved. Mm-hmm. But it's difficult to when lots of people are the counter argument to that is, well, are you trying to detract from services aimed at women who experience domestic abuse or services that are attracted to support people or support other families who experience domestic abuse? You say, no, it's the same issue here. We're just trying to address it.
So can
and work with people in that respect. And I think the approach taken by the political party here is extremely alienating, and it's setting the cause back.
Counterproductive, potentially?
Yes, I would agree with that.
I should let Mike come back in on that. Mike?
Yes, domestic violence is a very interesting point. Because at the end of the day, there's only so much public money available to support victims of domestic abuse. And if 99% of that money is going towards female victims of domestic abuse, then there's a problem.
Yeah, but Daniel's point is that, victims of domestic abuse, regardless of gender, should get our Kaye out? Why should we distinguish on the basis of gender and give the impression that in order to support victims, male victims of domestic abuse, you somehow have to take services away from female victims of domestic abuse?
Well, I think you have to ask, how is it that 99% of public money in this area goes towards organisations looking after women? And it's perfectly simple. In the early 1970s, militant feminists kicked a woman called Erin Pizzey out of the Chiswick women's refuge, and they've basically seized all government money ever since that point. And she still, to this day, 40 years on, is campaigning for male victims of domestic abuse to get some attention.
Right. So you seem to think is there a conspiracy at work here, Mike? Do you think?
Well, there's undoubtedly a conspiracy. I mean, it's very much driving. I mean, it's a huge gravy train for militant feminists, the whole domestic violence agenda.
Okay. Let me just let Alan Bissett comment on that, and then I'm going to bring in Kenny.
Well, I mean, obviously any victim of domestic abuse should be cared for and sympathised with, and I think you'll find that actually most feminists would agree with that. There aren't feminists out there who agree with violence against men simply for the sake of it. But, the figures on Mike's own website about domestic abuse show that in 2011 and 2012, 17 men died at the hands of their partner compared to 8 women. So that's 5 times as many women being killed by their spouses as men, which might explain why there are more women's refugees than men.
Yeah. On the conspiracy thing, let me bring in Kenny. Kenny, good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. You're the member of a men-only club, Kenny. I don't know exactly.
Well, I'm not a member of a men-only club, no.
Oh, you're not? Apologies. I wasn't sure what that was. There was a very scant little note there. You tell me then. What's your situation?
I'm not sure I would support a political party about this, but I certainly think that certain aspects should be highlighted where men are disadvantaged. I mean, the custody cases have been well documented and they've been mentioned, and even where situations where men get visiting rights, these are not always allowed by the women. Men sometimes have difficulty enforcing their rights there. So let's take selection of shortlists to fight a parliamentary election. Sometimes these are all female shortlists to ensure female selection of a candidate. I mean, surely it should always be the best candidate. I mean, this positive discrimination, social engineering, if you like, it must be demeaning for women. You're only chosen in a selection by a selection panel because you're a woman. Now, that's surely wrong. That must be wrong.
Well, Kenny, I suppose what I would say is you have to kind of look a bit further back on that. I mean, if we look at our current Westminster cabinet, and off the top of my head, I think there'll be 3, possibly 4 out of more than 20. Do you think that's because all of those men are absolutely the best people for the job?
No, I think it could be that because a lot of women don't apply, Kay.
Right, and why do you think that might be?
Well, you've got the same thing in that a lot of men are not primary school teachers. Perhaps men don't apply for that either, in the same way as women maybe don't apply for that. I think that women are disadvantaged because, generally speaking, they're lookers after of children more than men. And perhaps they're not as ambitious, by the way. So perhaps they feel that it's not the job for them, and also they couldn't do their duties at home with the children to the same extent. So I think to a great extent it's personal choice why there's not so many women there. By the way, do you remember Blair's Babes?
Yes.
Where are they all now?
Oh, well, a lot of them are still about. Unfortunately, they're not in... Well, I say unfortunately. I take that back. They are not in power, unfortunately, for them, and therefore perhaps not so prominent. Let me bring in Steve in Dumbarton. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning, Kay.
Good morning. Do you think men need their own political party?
Well, I don't know if giving men their own political party is... I can see Mike's point. I think he's making quite a valid point, actually. I was a serving firefighter for a number of years, and just to sort of qualify things, I'd worked with females since I was a recruit, basically. There was a girl in my squad when I'd done my basic training. When I went to my sort of first station, there was another female recruit there, a female commanding officer, so I certainly don't have anything against females. I'm not one of these dinosaurs that sometimes you get in the fire service that never worked with females, sort of seen them as an alien species sometimes. But what I witnessed was the negative effects, if you like, of positive discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was common knowledge throughout the fire service that females were getting, they were trying to encourage females, shall we say, to join the fire service.
Mm-hmm. Well, what is the percentage of females in the fire service? Have you any idea, Steve?
I couldn't tell you offhand, but I mean, it's definitely improving. As I say, I'd worked with females throughout my career.
Will it be single digit?
No, I wouldn't say so.
No.
But what happened was, in order, just to get back to my initial point, is there was, to go through the sort of basic training, there's certain sort of criteria you need to meet, both physically and mentally. And there was instances of females getting passed, if you like, who were unable to do basic jobs. One of the things is a strength test that involves hauling a ladder aloft, which is a basic thing you need to be able to do in the fire service. It's a very basic drill and quite an important one. And there was one instance I knew of a female who was unable to do this, and was passed through. And if that had been a male, he would have failed. There were males that in similar cases that were basically failed.
And does that cause resentment then?
It causes a lot of resentment. And what it done, it has a negative aspect to both males and females, because as I say, I worked with a female when I initially went to my home station, and she was an excellent firefighter, and all the females I worked with were excellent, and again, everyone who worked with them would say so. But what that done was it cheapened their achievement, if you like, because the common perception was, and it was common knowledge. I mean, it's not a perception that females were getting in.
Yeah, but I suppose if it depends what kind of service you want, doesn't it? And I mean, with emergency services, we do tend to put a lot of focus on strength, which is, of course, a very important thing. But I would imagine any firefighter or any service would need a mix of skills, and where there may be instances where women don't have the same physical skills or strengths that men do, they perhaps have other skills, and I'm maybe stereotyping here in terms of communication skills and soft skills that might not be so present in the men. So actually to have a more balanced service is a good thing. But of course, when there are individual instances that somebody would appear to be passed when they shouldn't be, then that can cause resentment. But maybe the big picture is that you're moving to a better place. I mean, I know in the police service that was something that's certainly been found when you're talking about dealing with victims of domestic abuse, both male and female, that sometimes a female officer might not always be the better person to deal with it. So it's kind of changing the makeup of the services. There's times in your life that you need a Morag from Dundee, and this is one of them, I can tell you. Good morning, Morag.
Good morning, Kaye.
Good morning.
I'm going to try and be very self-disciplined, because
Good.
I could talk about this from now until tomorrow morning.
Right.
However, I'm going to confine myself to two areas. First of all, I'm going to say this really disturbs me, because to me it's yet another evidence of what's going on in society just now, which is divide and rule, certain sections of society against other sections of society. However, moving on from there on to education. Now, the first thing I would say to your gentleman,
he's still with us, Morag. He's Mike Buchanan.
Well, Mike, I will say to him, as far as education is concerned, now I can't speak for the English system, I can only speak for the Scottish one. When I was young, we had in Scotland what is called the qualifying exam, which in England was called the 11+. And when this exam was, and that decided whether you were going into senior secondary, high school, and ultimately the aim was university or whatever, or a junior secondary, which was trade-based. When the exam was set up, and this is all verifiable, this is not just me making it up, when the exam was first set up, the assumption was that there might be a 50-50 split between girls and boys, or that boys might be attaining rather more numbers for going to high school than girls. It turned out that in actual fact, girls were outstripping boys by a country mile. So instead of looking at why that was, what they did was they said that in order to pass the exam, boys had to achieve 50% pass rate, girls had to achieve 80% in the tests in order to pass. So the education system was skewed against girls. And what has now happened, and of course there were lots of studies done of teacher-pupil interaction in the classroom, which very clearly showed that teachers unconsciously focused on boys to the exclusion of girls.
But Morag, when was that? Because I suppose what Mike's saying is we've swung too far in the opposite direction now.
The studies that were done were in the 80s.
Right.
And
so now in 2013, 30 years
girls,
on...
What I want to say is that girls are achieving their natural level. That's in a nutshell. Mike may not like that, but the fact remains, and it's evidenced all the way through university as well, that girls actually are higher achievers for many reasons, and I haven't got time to go into those. So that's the education system. So yes, they need to look at boys, but I would argue that that is a very good case for single-sex schools, because both boys and girls do better in single-sex schools.
Well, it has to be said that Moira, who's a head teacher, phoned in to say that in her experience, and she took a very, very measured approach to this whole discussion, that perhaps there was an argument to say that the education system had become feminised to a degree that didn't particularly favour boys. So maybe we had gone on another direction. Let me give you one more of Mike's headlines, Morag, that basically men bring in 72% of the tax take. Am I right in my figures there, Mike?
That's right, exactly right.
And are being poorly served for that contribution.
Kaye, that is because once girls get out of school, they find that the world of work has got its barriers. We all know about the glass ceiling, etc. So obviously, the more you earn, the more tax you pay. And in any case, Mike, can I finish, please, because I've got another important point to make. In my experience of local government, I've always worked in local government. Women have a very hard job, or did until very recently have a hard job of progressing up the ladder into directors' posts. That's that side of it, but there's another deadly...
Well, listen, Morag, just before you do come in with that, and we've got time for it, but I must let Mike respond. Go on, Mike.
Yes, thank you. The glass ceiling is it's a nonsense. I actually wrote a book called The Glass Ceiling Delusion, and the reason that men dominate in the senior reaches of business and so on have been known since at least 2000, the year 2000, when Catherine Hakim, a renowned sociologist, wrote or published a paper on something she called preference theory, and her researchers basically discovered that while 4 out of 7 British men are work-centred, only 1 in 7 British women is.
I wonder why that is.
That's why males don't.
Mike, can I interrupt you? Women are traditionally, and you're trying to change thousands of years of socialisation, and I may say Catherine What's-Her-Name's research has been fairly widely discredited, but that aside, leaving that aside, no, it's not, and that's not a highly intellectual way of debating with me.
Well, I'm sorry, but
However, let me finish. Women have been socialised since time immemorial, as have men, that men go out to work and women stay home and support. Now, it's fine if they want to have a little career, but at the same time, social attitude studies have proved time and time and time again, even as recently as last year, that women still undertake 80% of the domestic and child-rearing responsibilities, even when they're holding down a job. Now, that is fact. Like it or not, Mike, that's fact according to social attitude studies, unless you want to try and say that they're skewed and wrong as well. Women have got 2 jobs. Men can solely focus on going out to work and pursuing a career.
Okay.
A woman has got to support him to get out to work in the morning, get the children organised, and then get herself out to work. I mean, there's only 24 hours in the day, and there's only a certain amount of energy that any average human being has got. Okay. And frankly, women are flogging themselves to death.
Morag, let's let Mike have a quick response, and I'm going to speak to Alan quickly before we end, and then there's a man who's going to say screw it, and that's probably quite a good thing. Mike?
Yes, the reality is that women compared to men are far more likely not to be in paid employment or to work in part-time employment from the moment they leave further education to retirement age.
Sorry, what was that?
The point I'm making is that women are far less likely to the number of women who are not in paid employment or who are in part-time work hugely exceeds the number of men who are.
Yeah, I think, to be fair, I think when I tried to explain that point might be... Listen, let's finish this off. Let me bring in Alan Bissett again. As a man, what have you made of this conversation, Alan?
Well, I mean, it's not that there aren't individual discrepancies within the system that can be looked at where perhaps men actually are being disadvantaged. But to turn this into an entire politic and an entire worldview in which women are the ones with the power in society is gearing all its resources towards them is simply distorted.
Yeah, well, we're going to leave it there. Mike, thank you very much for your time. Thanks for everyone's time. Really interesting text here. Em in Glasgow, I'm enjoying your responses to Mike. Oh dear. I do feel there's a degree of misogyny underlying his ideas. I certainly heard his stereotyping and prejudicing regarding single mothers in certain circumstances. Perhaps he would be happier if they were stoned and banished from society. What exactly is his alternative to paying benefits for children of single mothers not in employment? Well, I think he's hoping to be a deterrent. Somebody agrees with Moira. My daughter is in a university year group of 129. Only 18 are boys in what was once a male-dominated career. If things carry on in the sidestepping of boys in education and life in general, there'll be no role for men in society at large. Is this what we want? Graham, a woman only needs to accuse a man of domestic and that's it. He's arrested, told to leave the house and locked up. End of story. Whether domestic abuse took place or not, hardly fair. Really broad-ranging views, people coming from all sorts of directions on this. Peter in Edinburgh, sign me up for the Men and Boy Party. I'm the only earner in this house but not allowed to speak during Coronation Street.